Wisdom calls out in the public spaces. Tuvalu is sinking. The polar ice caps are shrinking. The salmon rivers are silting. Old growth forests are vanishing. Oil is seeping, leaking, leaching. The air is burning, hurling. Can you not hear me? Can you not see me? Rivers are flooding. Lakes are emptying, cities are boiling, deserts are growing, skies are choking, billowing, smoking, fish are cancerous, leaden and gasping, bees are starving, hornets are murdering. Can you not hear me? Can you not see me? For 7 years, I would walk up from Lucien Lallier train station to the McGill campus where I worked at the United Theological College. And my route took me past the panhandlers on the doorways to the metro, along St. Catherine and up to Sherbrooke and across to the Roddick Gates, where most days at least someone, and often a group, would be there with their sandwich board or their flyers about this, that, and the other terrible fate about to descend upon humanity if I or we didn't do this, that, or the other. I became pretty practiced at ignoring wisdom's cry at the street. I missed most of the town criers, and I dismissed them as anything but wise. But I'm the fool. Those Tim's Cup panhandlers, Lucien, Philippe who loves apples, by the way, they are wisdom's streetwise cry to us to notice how we have normalized the dehousing and dehumanization of people, our siblings, who are poor or mentally ill. And that one billboard-wearing climate crier whose name I confess I never bothered to learn, who stood there by the Roddick Gates in snow and rain and heat wave a decade ahead of Greta. That man was wisdom's megaphone, alerting us to a disaster of our own making. Only I was too rushed on my sense of purpose, my now, to be curious enough to care. So now, Chochmah, Sophia, wisdom, shouts from the storm clouds, from the creeping mercury in the thermometer, from those algae blooms and milfoil clogging of our summer cottage lakes. She's using any language she can. She appears with pigtails and a frown, weary of misogynistic, ageist, petrochemically paid-for dismissal of her dedication to sing out for the silent symphony of creatures and whole ecosystems that are imperiled by human greed. And she is getting hoarse. But she is handing out the song sheet to we passers-by, and it's time we started to sing her tune along with her, a Kyrie for our time.
In a world so full of beauty and wonder, we can see so much that should not be. Children live in poverty and hunger. How can we pretend we do not see? Kyrie eleison. world so full of hope for tomorrow. Chanted dreams surround us every day. People live in sickness, pain, and sorrow. How can we just turn and walk away? Kyrie eleison, Kyrie eleison, Kyrie eleison, eleison. We have the love of God to share. Through our faith, we can show the world we care. We need to serve as God commands, joining hearts, joining hands with people everywhere. Kyrie eleison,
Truth must be told before reconciliation can happen. That's true in human relationships. It's also true with respect to the human relationship with creation. And the truth is, somehow, as a species, and God forgive us, those of us who are members of a Judeo-Christian faith have somehow taken God's call in Genesis to tend and care for creation and turned it into this license to commodify and commandeer, to dominate, extract, and consume. It's time to stop. It's time for us to learn how to occupy our true place within the web, the fabric of God's good creation. Now, I've read a lot this summer in preparation for this Creation Tide series, and I will confess that a lot of it has petrified me, locked me in, frightened me, and disempowered me, especially these raging cries for some penitential humility. And I'll be honest, but sackcloth and ashes and wringing hands don't energize me that much, and they are not that inspiring to us to become humbly curious about what our true place in creation could or should be. So I'm going to take a slightly weird tack here and try something with you that I have found has worked for me, and it worked for someone about 900 years ago too. The 12th century mystic, Hildegard von Bingen, after having resisted wisdom for years, writes of a moment in her life where she gave up the hubris of claiming powers for the human that simply aren't ours. And in that process, she discovered the delight, the freedom, the awe of being what she calls a feather on the breath of God. For Hildegard, this was a liberation from trying to behave as if she were God, And it allowed her instead to be led into this space of holy wisdom, to dream, to sing, to compose and make music, to love, and to stand up lovingly against the powers that oppressed. And in this process was unleashed in her and her community this ability to create medicinal and horticultural innovations that healed and cured and encouraged human and creature thriving centuries ahead of her time. Now, I'm not that mystical. So I'm not 100% sure that I really want to be a mere feather floating on the breeze. And Norman knows I have playing in my head right now the opening and closing tracks of Forrest Gump, where you watch the feather. But then again, if the breath of God is Ruach, HaChochmah, Sophia, wisdom, then maybe I do. To be held aloft by God's wisdom, to go where it leads me, to rest where it settles me, to weave through this world's beauty with as light a touch as a feather, rather than to be deluded or dragged down by human lies about our capacity to control the wind, then yeah, maybe we do. Maybe we do want to be a feather on the breath of God. As beautiful, as essential, and as inconsequential as a feather. As the song says, touching the earth lightly, using earth's abundance gently. Somehow this image feels more fitting to the rightful, loving, gentle work of creation care that each and every one of us is called to do, each and every one is already doing a part of, and maybe could do a little bit more of. If we see ourselves light and held on God's breath like a feather, maybe we can learn to trust that every time we choose to drink water from a tap, not a bottle, that every time we put out the green bin and the brown bin and the blue bin, every piece of spent product that we can reuse before we recycle or repurpose. Every plant in our gardens that we nurture so that the bees can be bees. Every time we watch that night sky and feel connected to that infinity. Every choice that we make to buy a local product or to walk to the store, every time we choose to be curious, every time we choose, against ignorance, to support scientists and ecologists, the discernment we are in right now as voters to consider the planet as well as our pocketbooks in how we will vote. These may seem light and inconsequential, but are they? If they help to shift us from consuming creation, from there to finding community within it, then maybe wisdom's cry is not in vain. Amen.